Of music, we have it all here.
LDM Radio.
Station, solo hits musicales.
Welcome back to LDM Radio Sports Talk, the sports show that talks about sport, current events, and other topics relatable to sports fans. My name is Alfonso Caldero, and co-hosting, as always, is Harris Berger.
What's up, everybody? Happy New Year.
All right. Happy New Year to everybody. Well, we've been gone for about a month, and there's been a lot.
Feels like a month. We've been gone for about 2.5 weeks.
A lot of action has taken place since then. We don't have enough time in the hour allotted to get to everything, but we're going to start off with something that actually happened today. The New York Mets, who have been promising to be a powerhouse since Steve Cohen came in and bought the Mets in November. So now they made a couple moves. They got a starting catcher. They got a relief pitcher. But today they've actually made their first really big blockbuster power move by getting the former Cleveland Indians, which the Cleveland Indian name is going to be like a former Cleveland Indians itself.
To be named later.
Yeah, so the Cleveland baseball team, which we'll call them that. They traded all-star shortstop Francisco Lindor and starting pitcher Carlos Carrasco. They're going to call Flushing, Queens their home now, and they've sent the message that the Mets they've arrived.
Well, Mets fans got to be happy here. Uncle Stevie does it again.
Yeah.
He started out with two big signings earlier in the offseason when they acquired McCann and the relief pitcher. Two great moves to begin with. Follows it up by getting, a franchise-altering player like Francisco Lindor. He's one of the biggest names in the sport right now. Bring him in that infield with Pete Alonso. That team right now, the offense is pretty solidified. There's rumors flying around that they're going after George Springer in free agency. You bring him in, and that becomes one of the biggest. The Bronx Bombers will no longer be in the Bronx; they'll be in Queens. That's for sure. That team, you're poised for a fun season out in Flushing, and I'm excited.
I'd say the Mets already had a pretty formidable lineup compared to past years. It seemed like what was the biggest strength was the starting pitching, and then that faltered a little bit with Steve Matz kind of not living up to potential. Zach Wheeler ended up leaving to the Philadelphia Phillies before last season. And the bullpen, even though they got Dylan Betances and whoever else, they ended up still faltering. So that's going to be a main question for them moving forward. But they're setting themselves up with another starting pitcher to add to the rotation, and now one of the more sought-after trade acquisitions that was out there. It's been almost like the worst-kept secret that the Cleveland no-names were going to end up trading Lindor. Yeah. So it's not exactly a surprise on Lindor moving, but it was a surprise that it actually went to the New York Mets. There was a lot of talk of him wanting to go to the Yankees, and it looked like the Yankees were going to make a deal. The trade proposals for him to go to New York, the return was way drastic.
Astronomical.
Yeah, it was just like, I guess it's, you'd have to look at it from the AL to AL is like you have to pay that penalty because, basically the no-names ended up losing to the Yankees in the playoffs. So the chances of them meeting again were going to happen. So he ends up going to the New York Mets. The only name I recognized was Ahmad Rosario, who's not even like that great of a shortstop. It seemed like he just kind of learned how to hit, very solid defensively. But the other trade, I'm sure it's like a potential laced inside of a lot of those players. But it's an impact move, and the Mets are going to be they're going to be formidable there
for sure. And you look at the players that went back to Cleveland in that trade, and it kind of leaves your head scratching a bit. You look at what they wanted from the Yankees, and you look at what they got from the Mets, and in hindsight, you didn't have to give up Nimmo. You didn't have to give up a lot of the big name minor league pieces and a lot of big young names that the Mets or that other teams probably would have had to given up in order to get them. If you're a Cleveland fan, you got to be scratching your head here and wondering what's going on with that organization. How you don't pay this guy and this guy Francisco Lindor, how you don't pay him all of the money. Top 5 player in the league, probably top 3 in my mind off the top of my head, not named Mookie Betts or Mike Trout.
Yeah, 5-tool player for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's going to get the next biggest contract, hopefully, from the Mets. They signed him long-term, and he's part of that organization for a long time. And Mets fans need to be excited. It's going to be a fun year for them. But now you're kind of starting to teeter on, and we'll touch on this when we get closer to baseball season. When you start adding all these big names like this and you start building these kind of rosters, the expectations get higher.
Yep.
And we know that Mets fans and the Mets organization do not live up well to expectations. So we'll have to see. But for now, it's a fun thing to be excited about here in New York.
Yeah, on paper it's great. And the one thing for the Cleveland no-names is when you know somebody's going to get traded and you wait a certain amount of time, it hurts the leverage. So that's basically what happened in this trade, where everybody knew that they had to unload him. So if they would have unloaded him maybe in the middle of the season last year, or at any other point when it was rumored that he was going to go, the return would have been higher. But when you wait too long, then you end up getting a smaller return than what you could have gotten. So that's what happened there. Yeah. So good local news for the New York Mets fans out there. So we're gonna move on to college football, and there is a huge game going on Monday.
Before we jump into that, you have some atoning to do.
I do.
We'll get to mine later.
Okay.
The last time we were here before the college football playoff, we talked about rankings, and you had a lot to say about The Ohio State University.
Yeah.
And boy, did they show that they belonged in that 4 spot or in that 3 spot where they ultimately ended up.
I'm gonna say yes and no. Because yes, they've proven that they're worthy of the slot and things like that. But when you don't play 5 games, there are a lot of different.
They played 6 games.
All right, so they played 6 games. So usually they should have played 11, right? So they didn't play 5 games. So when those variables that could have happened is the star players could have gotten injured. There could have been an upset where they truly didn't just earn the spot itself. I think it still leaves a lot to be desired that they played a drastic amount of less games than all the other people that were in the national title and other people that could have taken that spot. But they passed the eye test and they ended up making it happen. And congratulations to them. They absolutely wiped the floor with Clemson. And
Ohio State beat Clemson in that semifinal 49-28, and it wasn't even that close.
Yeah.
The score dictates a little bit closer of a game than it was. Ohio State dominated that game from start to finish. From the guy leading the Clemson offense, who is supposedly the clear-cut number 1 favorite for months and months, number 1 draft pick for months and months and months. The next great one after Elway and Luck is what they're saying here. He did not look good. That Ohio State front 7 got after him like it was nobody's business, and they just kept coming, and they had no answer. And on the other side, the second-ranked quarterback coming into this draft, Justin Fields, had 398 yards and 6 touchdowns in that game.
A lot of people are saying that he might be the consensus number 1.
I don't think so yet. It depends on who the Jaguars decide to go and find as their head coach. If it becomes an Urban Meyer sweepstakes, then we could see something crazy like that happen, and Jets fans might end up getting what they wanted to this whole time. But Ohio State looked good. They ran over Clemson all over the place. Trey Sermon, Olave, that whole team just for a defense that's considered the second best defense or top defense arguably in the country, that Ohio State offense looked incredible. They move on to the finals where they're going to take on Alabama. No shock here. Alabama was the clear-cut number 1, head over heels for everybody else, head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. Alabama beat
it always seems like
31-14.
It always seems like Notre Dame doesn't show up for these kind of big games.
No, Notre Dame's the most overrated team on the planet.
So that doesn't exactly shock a lot of people.
No, based on name alone and the money that Notre Dame generates is the only reason why Notre Dame has the clout that Notre Dame has. They're 0-7 now. against ranked opponents during bowl season, and frankly, the scores have not been close. Alabama dominated that game. It was 31-7 for the majority of the game. Notre Dame got a late touchdown to make it 31-14, and ultimately covered that spread. Which, if you know that Notre Dame is not good when Alabama, or how good Alabama is when they came into that game, as 19-point favorites, 19-point underdogs. Notre Dame had no shot to win that game from the kickoff. Mac Jones was excellent in the game. Devontae Smith, who is our new Heisman Trophy winner, congratulations, Devontae Smith. First wide receiver to win the award since '98, I believe, maybe even earlier than that. He was fantastic in that game, 105, and Devontae Smith continues to lead that team. So Devontae Smith is going to be a key in that matchup in that national championship game. The Ohio State secondary has not been great this year. They're getting Jalen Waddle back, who's their number one defensive back. So we'll see kind of how the matchup goes. Devontae Smith, 105 receptions, 1,641 yards, and 20 touchdowns this season. I mean, that's a historical season for a wide receiver and well deserving of the Heisman Trophy. So pretty good there. What do you think going into the national championship? What are you looking forward to?
I'd say that Ohio State's going to be nice and fresh going into this game, but I think Alabama, they just end up taking their experience and they end up just winning outright. I don't think it's going to be close, honestly.
So it's a 6.5-point spread right now. Ohio State is actually, they're coming into the game. Justin Fields took a shot to the ribs, which ultimately got one of Clemson's linebackers kicked out of the game, took a helmet to the ribs for a targeting penalty, and ended up, he's still nursing that injury coming in, so he's not 100%, most people are saying. But can he be magical again? He's going to have to be in order to keep this game close. Like you said, if Justin Fields can't do it, can't do close to what he did against Clemson, this game won't be close, unfortunately. But they also have Trey Sermon on the back end as their running back, grad transfer from Oklahoma. He had 331 yards and 2 touchdowns, setting a school record. Eddie George, who's an NFL Hall of Famer, held that record for a long time. Coming into that game, that was in the Big Ten title game. And then in the semifinal, he had 193 yards and another touchdown. Just ran all over. I mean, he's got the biggest 2-game stretch in Ohio State football history. Pete Werner on the back end for them, leading tackler. He's going to has a tough matchup with Najee Harris, who a lot of people love to see. I mean, he had a great beautiful hurdle over a defender in the semifinal game. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this game. I think it's going to be a lot of high scoring. I'm going to take the over probably in this game for sure. We'll see kind of where it ends up on Monday. It's going to be a question of Ohio State's front seven. Haskell Garrett is a big name. He's the number one ranked defensive tackle in college football right now. Is he going to be able to hold up against this? Or is the Alabama offensive line going to be able to hold up against that front seven and be able to keep Mac Jones upright to be able to get the ball away to his weapons on the outside? It'll be interesting to see kind of where we end up, but I think Alabama probably does win this game. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people say. I would probably take Ohio State to cover that spread, but we'll kind of see how the rest of the week ends up. There are some COVID issues that are starting to arise within the Ohio State organization, so we'll kind of have to keep our eyes peeled for that. But that game's scheduled for Monday night.
That definitely plays a part in all the sports nowadays. So in looking back on the big Ohio State beef on not playing enough games, and you look at who potentially could have been in there, and Cincinnati, who was a number 8 seed, they ended up losing to Georgia 24-21. So I guess it is what it is. They made the decision. Seems to be going well.
And the Gators was the other team that should have been in there, and they got blown out.
Yeah,
in their bowl game to Oklahoma. So
so there were a lot of upsets up and down the lineup there, but it is what it is, and now we have, it's going to be a formidable matchup. It shouldn't, I don't think it's going to be these super blowout scores that we had, but I could see like an Alabama winning by 10 for sure.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. It's going to all, like I said, it's all going to depend on the Ohio State offense. Their secondary is not great. So it's going to be their front seven on defense that's going to have to stop and try to get to Mac Jones to keep that game slow. But as long as they can keep Justin Fields on the field and Trey Sermon, and they can run and move the ball and everything like that, I think it'll be a shootout. I think it'll be a little bit closer. But if they're going to struggle to move the ball, it's going to be a tough game for them.
All right, so we're going to move on to the big boys now. The NFL playoffs start this weekend.
Absolutely.
On Saturday. And now we're in
super wild card weekend. Is
Yeah.
how the NFL's advertising it.
Unprecedented. We have 6 total games going on right now with only 2 teams, one on each side being having a bye. Usually it's 2 teams having a bye. I absolutely love this system.
I love this.
I
Yep,
think it's amazing.
absolutely.
I hope they keep carrying this over into future years. So your number 1 seed in the AFC is the Kansas City Chiefs. They are waiting for however this plays out, and we're going to go game by game. So the Colts versus the Bills, and this game is in Buffalo. Who you got?
I'm going with the Bills here. I think there's no team in football hotter than the Bills right now. They just look like they're having fun playing, and they're dancing. They're having a good time. Josh Allen's running, throwing. They're firing on all cylinders at this point.
I feel like ever since the Steeler game, they've really
exactly
come into their own. Like, because there was that little in between time. You know, what are the Bills going to be? And then like once they ended up beating the Steelers, it was just like they just basically took
Yeah,
off
I mean,
after
and
that.
they finished with a 13-3 record this season. Their 3 losses came from 2 games that were rescheduled because of COVID reasons, not because their issues, is because of who they were playing against. And then on one was a miraculous Hail Mary. So when they have their time to prepare and everything goes the way that it's supposed to go, the Bills are a dangerous football team. And in my opinion, the team that will beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. I think that's going to end up happening. I think that if there's a team that can do it, it's going to be this Bills team. Hopefully they get the shot to do it. The Bills are 6.5-point favorites coming into the game. If Josh Allen continues, this Colts defense is no joke, though. This is a defense that's built to beat up on this kind of offense that Josh Allen runs. But with Stephon Diggs, you're getting John Brown back. It's going to be a long game for them, and it's going to be, can they hold up against that fiery Bills offense, and we'll see kind of what happens.
Well,
I like the Bills to win 24-20.
I think it's a lot of these matchups are actually like the strengths versus strengths. So in this one, the Colts defense is really, really good, and they're going to go up against a very formidable Bills offense. I think the Colts end up winning. I think this is going to be where this is like one of Phillip Rivers' probably his last ride, if you'd have to estimate it. Yeah. And he has the playoff experience. There's a lot of Bills that are coming in here without that playoff experience. So I'm going to ride that factor and say that the Colts win 27-23.
Important to note, Bills have not won a playoff game since 1995. So
yeah.
Jim Kelly, those 4 Super Bowls that they went to and lost all 4 Super Bowls. But I think that the Bills hosting this game, it's unfortunate because I would love to see what the Bills Mafia looks like at Orchard Park with a packed house. And the only thing that would make this game better is if that stadium was filled to capacity and it snowed. If we got another snow game in Orchard Park and you had Bills Mafia jumping through tables, this would have been a wild game and a fun game to watch. But I still like the Bills here, and I think they're going to continue to roll.
Unfortunately, it really just absolutely kills the home field advantage for everybody. Really, like without the fan noise, it's a big factor because when you have like when somebody wants to call an audible or like the visiting team wants to call an audible, everybody could hear it. It's just it's unfortunate that this is the NFL and the times that we're living in right now, but that's what it is. It's really just some of them are gonna be like a dome playing in a cold weather stadium or something like that. That's really like the only home field advantage there is. I mean, there's really nothing else.
Yeah.
So then we have a divisional matchup with the Los Angeles Rams versus the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. What you got?
This one's an interesting one because Jared Goff had surgery on his thumb a couple weeks ago. Missed week 17. John Wolford, who used to be right in our neck of the woods, used to be a trader on Wall Street. After his time at Wake Forest and in the AAF, if you guys remember that, from a couple years ago, that little test run that they had. And he came in, he played pretty well, threw 200 yards and a touchdown in that game, got the Rams into the playoffs. If Goff can't go and he's got to start, since 2002, quarterbacks making their first ever playoff start in the wild card round are 9-30. So the odds are stacked against him in that case. Luckily, the Seattle defense has had their own issues, and the Rams defense is very good. Right? We all know how good the Rams defense is and how they match up against Seattle. They've already beaten them once this season. So it'll be an interesting matchup. I think that the Seahawks have never lost a home game in the playoffs under Pete Carroll. They're 6-0 under Pete Carroll in the playoffs. And the Seahawks are actually their offense is fully healthy for the first time all season, or for the first time since earlier in the season. Their previous 5 times when their projected start and lining up was 5-0. So this is a good team coming in. I like the Seahawks here 24-20 also.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Seahawks 20-13 for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. The familiarity might be the only thing that the Rams have going for them, but I mean, if you don't have the quarterback to,
this is one of those This is one of those games like you mentioned with home field, because the Seahawks' home field advantage is probably the best in football.
Man.
Yeah, them and the Saints are probably the 2 toughest places to play, and probably Green Bay, which is the other team that got the number 1 seed that I don't think we mentioned earlier. But that's going to be a tough place to go to and play, is Green Bay in the wintertime, because all roads to the Super Bowl through the NFC have to go through Lambeau Field. So that's going to be a tough place for people to go to, especially if you're a team like Los Angeles who plays in a dome in Los Angeles. So a little bit different environment going to Green Bay in January, that's for sure.
Yeah, so the Chiefs were the number 1 on the AFC, and the Packers were number 1 on the NFC. So they're the ones waiting for all of this madness to unfold and see what opponents they're gonna have. So then we go to our next match, or our last. Yeah, the lowest seed that comes out of here, which doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of upsets this weekend, I don't think, in my opinion. I think the Colts one might be the only one. But moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing the home team, Washington football team.
Bruce Arians got what he wanted. They won Week 17. They got the 5th seed. They wanted to play against the NFC East opponent, whoever that may be. We won't talk about how the Washington football team got into the playoffs, because we can spend a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
It's interesting here because this is the first time a 7-win team has made the playoffs since 2014. The last team to do that, a Ron Rivera coached Carolina Panthers. Who did they play in the playoffs? A Bruce Arians-led Arizona Cardinals team.
Wow.
So there's a little bit, and guess who won that game?
Arians?
Carolina.
Oh, Carolina
won that
okay.
game.
All right.
So it's a little bit interesting on how this matchup's going to go. I'm sure that's something that Ron Rivera's chirping on pretty hard this week during practice and meetings, trying to get his guys fired up. Although the Bucs have been rolling these last couple weeks coming into the playoffs. I mean, they just demolished the Lions. They played a great game in Week 17 against the Falcons. And unfortunately, they might be without Mike Evans, their number 1 receiver. But with all the weapons that they have, AB, Gronk, Godwin, Scotty Miller, they'll find a way to fill that hole. Fournette starting to figure it out again, running the ball. And Ronald Jones, so they'll figure it out. I think it is important to point out Washington does have a losing record coming into this playoffs, and they get to host a playoff game. Kind of a weird scenario there. And then the underlying story most of the people in New York will probably remember. Tom Brady 0-3 versus NFC East opponents in the playoffs. Albeit all 3 of them were in the Super Bowl, 2 of them against the Giants and 1 against the Eagles. But is the NFC East Tom Brady's kryptonite?
Wait, but Tom Brady also won the Super Bowl against the Eagles before.
Correct.
So.
All right, so he's 1-3.
Yeah.
My notes were missed.
But I'm gonna say that this game's just not even close. I think the Buccaneers are going to win 42-17 or something crazy like that. I think they continue on because, I mean, like you said, they finished the season just absolutely bulldozing teams.
Yeah.
And this is a team that shouldn't even be there. And then, like, you have Tom Brady, going back to the experience like Phillip Rivers. I mean, Tom Brady has, like, the pinnacle playoff experience. So he knows, and it might even help that Evans isn't there because it's like one less mouth to feed. Like, they have plenty of weapons at his disposal. So
for sure. And the only thing that that scares me a little bit about this Washington team is how good their defense is.
Yeah.
Their defensive front is one of the best in the league. Chase Young's probably going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. So good. They have so many weapons in the front on their front. If they can get after Brady, he's one of those quarterbacks. I mean, no quarterback likes to get hit.
Yeah.
Tom Brady probably likes getting hit the least out of everybody. If they can hit him and get to him and disrupt his timing, then they'll keep it close. Unfortunately, I don't see it that way. I think that the Bucs offensive line will be able to hold up. And Washington's only averaging 19 points per game coming into this game. So I got Bucs 27-13. That's my prediction for this game. I don't think it's close. The Bucs are 8-point favorites coming in. It's a big spread for a playoff game. It might be closer than that, but with the game being in Washington, being outside, no fans still, I just don't see that the Bucs being able to be slowed down.
Yeah, there's a bit of a home field advantage with the hot weather Tampa Bay going to play in Washington. Yeah. That's the only thing they really got going.
Tom Brady grew up playing in Foxborough.
Yeah, so I don't really. Yeah, it's just one of those things, you know. So that takes care of Saturday. So now we have the first game on Sunday, which I think has great potential to be the game of the week, is the Baltimore Ravens traveling to Tennessee to face the Tennessee Titans. What you got?
Yeah, we get a rematch of their Week 11 matchup, and the Week 11 there were some pregame fireworks. If you remember, the Titans were out dancing on the logo, having some fun out there. This has turned into quite a bit of a rivalry over the last couple of maybe a year and a half. This is their third time meeting in 12 months. For two teams that aren't in the same division, they're seeing each other quite a bit. The Titans knocked the Ravens out of the playoffs last year. You kind of remember that the Ravens were flying high coming into the playoffs, and you had this underdog Titans team that had just beaten Tom Brady, just ended that dynasty. Come in against Lamar Jackson, shut him down.
Yeah,
and then
nobody was shutting him down.
Yeah, and then they went on to play the Chiefs and had a lead actually at one point in that game. So this is a good Titans team. I think obviously Derrick Henry, important to point out, 8th player in NFL history to rush for 2,000 yards, back-to-back rushing titles for Derrick Henry. They're still without Taylor Lewan, who's a big piece of that offense, but they've seemed to be able to figure it out. The Ravens' defense has been pretty good, but is it going to be enough to stop Derrick Henry? They're giving up 4.4 yards per carry on their run defense. Derrick Henry's averaging 5.4 yards per carry, so something's got to give here. What are we going to see? I mean, you're giving up 4.4 yards per carry to every team that you played. That might as well be 10 yards to Derrick Henry. So that's going to be tough for them to slow him down. If they're able to keep the Lamar Jackson off the field and just run and clock out, then they're going to be real successful. I got the Titans here, 27-24.
All right. So I am going to go with the Ravens in this one, only because there's been a lot of times this season where you think that the Tennessee Titans have arrived and you think they're going to be, one of these 13-3 or 14-2 kind of teams, and then they just drop the ball. I think in this matchup we have that familiarity that you mentioned, and I just think that the Ravens end up coming out on top, 33-28.
The one thing with this matchup that I've been teetering on this matchup, and I ultimately settled on the Titans because of Derrick Henry. When you can run the ball and control the clock like they do most of the time, I know their defense isn't the best, but when you can control the clock and keep your defense off the field, then you have a better shot to win this game. Everybody's flying is so high on the Ravens right now. They had some struggles mid-season with COVID, with losing, with some emotional issues, what have you, within that organization, and they've seemed to have figured it out in the last couple of weeks here. And people are so high on the Ravens and saying, "Oh, I don't want to play if I was a team, I wouldn't want to play the Ravens. I wouldn't want some." I mean, they're kind of getting that hype again that they got last year. And Lamar Jackson, yes, is a great great quarterback. Hollywood Brown can be great. He's had some drop issues this season. Their defense with Patrick Queen and Marcus Peters, they're good. But this Titans offense with A.J. Brown, with Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill pulling the strings. I think that as long as they can control the clock, they have a better shot to win this game. I think it's going to be, like you said, I think it has the potential to be the game of the weekend, and I think it probably will be. It'll probably be the most fun game of the weekend to watch from a fan standpoint. But I just don't think that the Ravens are going to be able to pull out and meet the expectations that it seems like everybody's putting onto them.
Yeah, it'll be the clock. Controlling the clock is always going to be a big deal for a heavily run team. I don't know. I just think that Lamar Jackson, he got hit in the mouth last year in the playoffs, kind of came back down to earth. And, classically what divides the marginal players and the great players are, you fail and then you come back and you storm ahead. And, basically him winning this game would be like him like defeating one of his past nemesis. Or, so I just think that I think he's a great quarterback. I don't think he's like somebody who's gonna, between his playing style, his mental makeup, I don't think he's somebody who's gonna, continuously fail in the playoffs. And we'll find out here. Yeah. And I think he takes that next step. Mm. So now we're gonna go to another probably whitewash matchup between the Chicago Bears, who made the playoffs at 8-8, versus the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans.
The Bears are in the playoffs because the Cardinals failed everybody. The Cardinals were a team that should be here.
Yeah, you like I think the last show we had, you were hyping them up. Well,
man, the Cardinals are
next
such
to last
a good
show,
team.
The Cardinals, you were super high on them, and then the Bears weren't going to make it.
The Cardinals were coming off 2 big wins. They beat the Seahawks. They beat the Bills. I mean, you're talking about 2 playoff teams that they beat, and then the wheels fell off. Kyler Murray wasn't Kyler Murray. Then he got hurt, and then Steve Strevler had to come in and play, and just a big mess for them. They couldn't figure out a way to beat the Rams on Week 17 and get into the playoffs. And the Bears were the beneficiaries. The Bears came into that Sunday matchup thinking that they had to beat the Green Bay Packers to get in, and they got their doors blown off in that game. And it wasn't close, and Aaron Rodgers threw the ball all over that team, and it was over from the get-go. And they still find a way to sneak in. They have to go to New Orleans now to play this game. And I think it's going to be closer than what some people are saying. It's a 9.5-point spread at this point. I just don't think it's going to be – I mean, the 9.5 points is so many points for a playoff game. I think the Saints do have the ability to do it. Drew Brees is coming off that injury. What's he going to be like? He rested the last week. You have Alvin Kamara coming off of a COVID issue, that whole running back room coming off of a COVID issue. Yeah. How are they going to be after this? It's just going to be interesting. Mitch Trubisky basically has to play mistake-free football. Can Maserati Mitch do it? Can MVP Mitch shake the monkey off his back and win this football game against a team that has an issue in the playoffs at home? I mean, we saw what happened with the Minnesota Vikings 2 years in a row. You had the Minneapolis Miracle, and then you had the phantom push-off from Kyle Rudolph last year to knock them out of the playoffs again. So a team that doesn't have great success at home in the playoffs against a team that really nobody's given them a shot. However, I got the Saints 22-17.
I'm going to go with the Saints 35-13. I think this one's not close. I think that even the Saints just scoring 35 points might be generous, depending on what's going on. But
man, that Bears defense is just so good. It's hard.
Yeah, so I don't think this game's gonna be close at all. I think you have another team who's been down this road before. They know what to expect. The Bears, like they had success last year, but I don't know. I just don't. I don't see the Saints having this even a close game.
Imagine where the Bears are if they didn't go to Nick Foles.
Yeah.
Mitch Trubisky was 3-0, and they benched him. And then they lost 5 straight, I believe. And then they put him back in, and then they won games again, and they got into the playoffs. Mitch Trubisky is very inconsistent, albeit when he's good, he's good. And you have weapons like Allen Robinson, David Montgomery. That team is pretty good. That defense is what keeps them in games. It's the same thing in Washington, right? this Bears defense is probably one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league, and can cause problems for that Saints offense if Kamara's not 100%, if Latavius Murray's not 100%, if Drew Brees, who's probably still not 100%, but this could be the last time we see Drew Brees in an NFL uniform before he joins the NBC booth and starts calling games. So is this the last ride for Drew Brees, or do we get to live to see him play another week? We'll see.
All right. Then the last game on the docket on Sunday.
Interesting matchup we got because the Browns, first of all, congratulations to the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, right.
First time getting into the playoffs in 18 years. The dog They don't get to go. It's not a home game for them.
Nope.
They almost choked it away against Mason Rudolph, and without Cam Hayward and without T.J. Watt, so a lot of big names missing in the Pittsburgh lineup, and the Browns barely squeak out a win. But the Brownies are in. Brownies are in the playoffs, and what happens? They all get COVID. No players, 2 players have tested positive, so they'll be without one of their offensive linemen and one of their DBs for the game. More importantly, they're going to be without their head coach and play caller, Kevin Stefanski. He has tested positive and will not be on the sidelines calling plays for this game. They'll have a guy, A.J. Pellick, I want to say is his name, but that's probably wrong. He's going to be calling plays for the first time all season. He was supposed to call plays in the preseason, but we didn't have one because of COVID, so here we are. It's going to be a heavy dose of the run, just like normal, I think. Kevin Stefanski seems to think that he won't have a problem calling plays, and Baker will be able to do Baker things. The defense is going to be where the problem is because if Pittsburgh can come out and figure it out again, and especially with all their weapons at wide receiver, then the Browns are going to have issues. Is Denzel Ward going to be healthy enough to play in this game? We'll see for Cleveland. For me, I think it's a lot closer. It's a 6-point game right now. I think even with all of the COVID issues, I got the Steelers 26, Browns 23. I think it's still a pretty close game. We'll see kind of what happens. The Browns have not won a playoff game since 1994. So the longest of all of the teams in the playoffs, they're the longest without a playoff win. We'll see kind of where we go from here.
I'd say this is because of the super familiarity of these two teams playing against each other, even back-to-back weeks. I'm going to say that the Steelers edge the Cleveland Browns 28-27. I mean, there's a good chance that with Baker Mayfield's first experience that he could not show up the way we've seen all season. There's that possibility, and there's also the possibility that Ben Roethlisberger can take advantage and score. Have a 6-touchdown game. This game could really go either way. I just think overall it'll just be the tightest matchup of all the games of the Wild Weekend, and it's just they edge them out. 1 point kind of. Like a missed field goal maybe or something, something a little incidental is what divides this game.
If we're talking about missed field goals, it is important to point out the Cleveland Browns have Cody Parkey as their kicker. Cody Parkey is synonymous with the double doink. So we'll see if that has a factor. And is Chris Boswell going to be kicking for the Steelers? He's been hurt the last couple of weeks, hasn't played. So it's definitely going to be something with special teams, I think, as well. I think that's going to be a tough matchup, and we'll see kind of what happens with special teams. But I think that the Steelers they've started to figure it out over the last couple of weeks. They've gotten back to winning, and I think Mike Tomlin's kind of got it figured out. Yeah, exactly. And I think that the leadership has kind of stepped up to fill the holes of the injuries that they have on defense. We talked about Bud Dupree before. We've talked about Bob Spillane before. He's hurt. Devin Bush out. So they're missing a lot of their big names when they were such a dominant defense earlier in the season. But with T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward on the defensive line, they're still going to get after Baker, and they're going to have to, and be able to stop the run because Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb are a two-headed monster in that backfield.
So, one of the hot button topics of this year's playoffs is the fact that a 7-9 Washington no-name team won a division, one of the 6 divisions, and that the 8-8 Bears made the playoffs while the Miami Dolphins were 10-6, and they did not make the playoffs.
Yeah.
What is your stance on that?
Well, the Dolphins choked away their chances, and they gave up 56 points to the Bills in Week 17. They had a chance to get into the playoffs. They had to beat the Bills, who nobody knew if Josh Allen was going to play, and Josh Allen really didn't have to play. The Bills decided to play them because it's a division game. To keep your division rival out of the playoffs, why not? And they dominated that game. The more important thing to talk about here is, if we want to get into it, is what happened between the Eagles and the Washington football team in Week 17, and that was Doug Peterson basically just shutting the door on the Giants and saying, "Nah, we're going to throw the game."
Yep.
And that's where the issue is. I mean, we've talked about it in previous episodes. I hate the fact that the team with a losing record can get into the playoffs, let alone host a playoff game. Unfortunately, that's just the way that the playoffs is set up, where if you win your division, you get in. If the division's trash, then the division's trash, right? So that can't be controlled. But we talk about, I mean, we are a New York-based show. We talked about, I mean, from what I saw, Giants fans were irate about what happened. They have some degree of a right to be, but at the same time, your team went 6-10.
I've never seen Eagles fly so much.
Yeah, but again,
that before that game, and then they ended up just cursing them anyway.
Absolutely, but again, your team went 6-10. You didn't deserve a playoff spot. All right, the fact that you had to, yes, you beat the Cowboys on Week 17. No, the Cowboys were not good. Washington, you needed the Eagles to win. The fact that you needed to go 6-10 and still needed help to get into the playoffs is not the problem. The Eagles were not the problem. Granted, what Doug Peterson did is disgusting and just ridiculous of what he did, and I hope he gets fired. I've been calling for his head for the last 8 weeks on this show, probably, even before that, earlier in the season. But the Giants fans being upset that the Eagles didn't try hard in the third quarter and the fourth quarter of that game is not the issue. The Giants going 6-10, yeah, I get it. You lost Saquon Barkley and you lost Daniel Jones for a couple games, but you went 6-10 at the end of the day. I mean, you don't deserve to get in the playoffs at 6-10. The Washington football team went 7-9 and they got in. Unfortunately, that's the way that the playoff is set up, but that's what happens here.
I'd say my stance on it is it's the luck of the draw. So
right.
if you're in
also talking about 2 NFC teams versus an AFC
right.
team. So
right. You have
the AFC was really good this year.
Basically, you have the NFC not being as strong as the AFC. So like when people are building teams, the first thing they do is they build to defend their to defeat the other opponents in the division. First and foremost, because that's what you see all the time. 6 of the 16 games are against divisional opponents. So you want to beat the divisional teams. Then after that, you want to build your teams to ideally beat the other teams that you might face down the road, which is the other AFC team. So you had the AFC that was super stacked to the point that a 10-6 team didn't make the playoffs. But it's not like it's unprecedented. There's times that an 11-5 team hasn't made the playoffs and different things like that. So you have the AFC being super strong, and then you have the NFC kind of just being marginal after like 2 or 3 teams. And but it's just the luck of the draw. I don't think that there has to be any kind of changing of the system. You know, how are you supposed to know that 4 teams in one division is going to bottom out? You really don't. You know, and if that happens, then it's the luck of the draw. You know, I don't think Washington has to apologize to anybody for making the playoffs.
The only team that, not that I have an issue with them making the playoffs, because it's the other teams behind them obviously didn't do enough to get in, are the Bears, because the Bears are a wild card team. So it should be not the next best division winner is who should have gotten in there. They got the last playoff spot. I get it. But the fact that nobody behind them, so that you look at the AFC side, Colts had the Browns. They all had either the same or better records, and then it comes down to tiebreaker. Unfortunately, I think the way that the tiebreaker is set up is kind of weird with division wins, et cetera, because the Ravens play arguably in a tougher division, and the Browns play in a tougher division than the Dolphins do at this point in time. I think the AFC North is the best division in football at this point. But that's just the way that the cookie crumbles, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
that's what we have.
The tiebreaker system in the NFL is weird because once the Jets had their one win and they were tied with the Jaguars with the one win, I assumed that the Jets still had the number one pick because the Jaguars beat the Colts and the Jets at the time, who did they beat?
They beat the Rams. That was
They
a
beat
good
the
team.
Rams, but the Colts had a better record than the Rams, so I'm assuming that the Jets still have like that edge, but they
Right.
didn't. They ended up after they had that one win, they were like a 35% chance to get the first round pick.
Because it went off strength of schedule
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's so weird.
And I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, the only reason why I'll tell you right now, the reason why was because the Jets played the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Patriots,
Yeah.
and twice. So you had two good teams and one mediocre team that they played twice.
Yeah.
So that was the reason. The Jags. It was weird because if you keep it the same as the playoff tiebreaker, the Jags would not. The Jets still would have had the first pick because it was conference wins.
Yeah.
The Jags won a conference game, or not a conference game, a divisional game.
Yeah.
So weird way for a tiebreaker on that front.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence did declare for the draft this week, so the Jaguars all likely will be having the first pick. Well, they do have the first pick. All likelihood, the Jags will take Trevor Lawrence with the number one pick. The Jets are sitting at number 2. And then, interesting enough, we have the Dolphins at 3, who that talk about failures by Bill O'Brien and the Texans. I mean, you have a team that just won 10 games, and now they have the 3rd overall pick. What are you going to do here, right? So you got – and the Dolphins, I'll ask you this question. The Dolphins have an interesting point here, or have an interesting choice to make, is what do you do? Is Tua the guy? You can take Justin Fields or Zach Wilson or Trey Lance at 3 and restart again, right? You know the defense is good. You know the defense in Miami is good. They're ahead of schedule. But when the going got tough offensively in Miami, they had to turn to Ryan Fitzpatrick to get it done. In my opinion, it wasn't Tua's fault. I think that Chan Gailey, the offensive coordinator, who ultimately has resigned, and they'll be looking for a new offensive coordinator, was the main issue, I think, with Tua. He kind of closed the playbook a little bit for Tua. It wasn't as wide open. It was a lot of checkdowns and a lot of running. And they didn't really have a good running back to begin with. They had Ahmed, and they had a couple other guys that were mediocre, right? So I think the Dolphins need to go with a receiver, or if the Jets don't take Sewell at the second pick and they trade back, whoever doesn't take – if Sewell's there, you take Sewell to protect Tua, or you take Devontae Smith.
Yeah,
and give him another weapon on the outside.
The Miami Dolphins have an absolute gift with the 3rd round, having the 3rd overall pick, getting it from the Houston Texans, who at the times, the Houston Texans were one of the top teams in the AFC. They trade their first round pick. It'd be like late 20s, and then it ends up being number 3. So it's just absolutely incredible the way. And the Dolphins have the 1st and 2nd round picks of the Texans. So it's another low 30s. It's absolutely incredible how they fleeced them.
The Texans organization is just
Bill
O'Brien left rubble in that organization.
So bad.
Outside of Deshaun Watson, you're looking at and Deshaun Watson. First of all, it's important to note the Houston Texans did sign Nick Caserio, former assistant to Bill Belichick, and from the Patriots organization, as their GM. 6 years, $30 million. He is the new GM in Houston. Got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
They're already above the cap. More than likely, they're going to be releasing J.J. Watt. He's going to be cut, which is going to be wild because he's been the face of that franchise since he's been a rookie pretty much.
The ugly side of the NFL.
Unfortunately, they have a lot of cap issues. If they keep him, he's a $17 million cap hit. If they don't keep him, he's a $0 cap hit. So you kind of got to cut him and see what he may re-sign for less money. I don't think so. I think he's going to want to go out there and win something. And now you got Deshaun Watson, who is expressing a lot of dissatisfaction on social media and might be demanding a trade here shortly. Any potential landing spots you can see for him?
It's tough to tell. As far as who would have the money, I think basically
He's tradable because it's only about. I think the biggest cap hit's like 25 million.
It's gonna depend on if he wants a win or if he wants the money. So if he wants a win, then he could just latch on.
Well, he's already paid.
Yeah, so he could just
He's got his contract.
He could latch on to really anybody. You know, he could join like a Seahawks. He could join.
Nah, they don't need him. They got Russ.
Yeah, but just
so you got to look at the teams that don't need him, right? So the Seahawks, probably the Seahawks don't need him. The Ravens, the Chiefs, the Bills.
I think everybody could use a J.J. Watt.
No, not J.J. Watt.
Oh, who's
Deshaun Watson.
Oh, Deshaun Watson. Yeah.
Everybody could use a J.J.
Yeah,
Watt.
totally.
100%.
No,
at quarterback, because Deshaun Watson probably is going to want to trade out of there.
Yeah,
because that team's going to be trash for 4 to 5 years, and he's not going to waste his career in a rebuild, even though they just paid him. I don't think so. I think if you're him, and he had the second best statistical year behind Aaron Rodgers this season.
Yeah,
on a trash roster.
If it's I don't think Deshaun Watson's in a position where he go where he wants to go. They'll go like he'll get traded to a team that is going to give him the most amount of that's going to give him the biggest package. One thing I want to go back to is what you said about Tua, and if the Miami Dolphins end up basically punting him away and then getting another quarterback. I think at this point, 1 year is not enough time to gauge a quarterback. I think it's really hard for rookies to come in and be absolutely effective in year one of the NFL or really any sport. I think the stories that of people that have excelled from year one, from like game one all the way through, those are the ones that have spoiled it for everybody, and the amount of money that they end up getting, it just kind of skewers. Yeah, it just kind of like it skewers everything. So like the expectations for everybody coming in, like a Mitch Trubisky being like, you know, like he was picked like 5th overall or something like that. Yeah. And he's
been there a couple years.
Yeah.
Now.
So you know you have these situations where they're pressured to do everything right away. But I think the quarterbacks need at least 3 years. Like after 3 years, then you are basically going to be.
I agree with you.
Right.
But it's not often that you get a 3rd overall pick the year after you draft a quarterback with the 4th overall pick.
Yeah, but that's the problem. So basically, if you have you can strengthen other needs, or Miami can also trade back and get other needs.
Sure.
You know, like they have a lot of different options. I don't think punting away a quarterback is the right thing to do at this point.
Now let me
not
ask
after
you this.
year one.
Now let me ask you this:
Mm-hmm.
if you're the Dolphins GM, right, and you can trade Tua, your 3rd overall pick, the Texans' 3rd overall pick, your other 1st-round pick, and next year's 1st-round pick to the Texans for Deshaun Watson, would you do that?
That's too much.
Oh, man. He's going to go for 4 first-round picks.
Do you think?
Yeah. He's the 2nd best quarterback in the league right now.
I don't know.
3rd best quarterback in the league right now if you want to count Patrick Mahomes.
I think that's too much. I think, because, the whole football team, and then the fact that Watson's been hurt before, he's not exactly the 100% most durable quarterback either. So.
Well, he tore his ACL one time.
Yeah. Just,
statistically, this season, he had the 2nd best year he had the best season not by anyone not named Aaron Rodgers. Right. All right, who's going to be the NFL MVP, by the way.
That was a year after losing Hopkins to the Cardinals.
Right, so on a team that didn't have any weapons, if you go to Miami, where they arguably don't have a lot of weapons either, but they have a good defense,
right,
and you put Deshaun Watson into that lineup, oh, boy. I would hate to be someone that roots for a team in the Dolphins division, and we both are. So.
I think Miami right now is in a position of strength where they have
Miami's ahead of schedule.
Defense,
yeah, for sure.
So they have a great defense. They lost their offensive coordinator because he left. They can get somebody who can utilize a more experienced Tua after having already went through his 1st season in the NFL, instead of getting somebody else in and having to go through growing pains, the same kind of growing pains, if not worse. I think you got to stick with him, and then you got to just try to maximize him and then maximize the other weapons around him. You said Miami doesn't have too many offensive weapons. They can go out and get one now. They can get 2. They can get 3. The Miami Dolphins are going to be scary, I think, coming up.
It's going to be a fun offseason.
Yeah. The Miami Dolphins are setting themselves up to be very, very strong for many years to come, all depending on if Tua ends up becoming the man.
Yep. So that's going to wrap up our show, guys. Next week, hockey's back. So NHL season starts January 13th. We'll have a full season breakdown and some previews, maybe a little rivalry bet between the two of us.
Yeah.
We'll go over the new division lines. We'll go over some key matchups to watch, some key player moves that have happened over the last couple of weeks, and some division previews. And we'll kind of get into our predictions for the season, what we want to see, what we don't want to see, and we'll kind of get into there.
Yeah, heavy into hockey next week. So we'll see you then. This is the LDM Radio Sports Talk Show. Alfonso Caldero, Harris Berger. We'll see you next week.
See you, everybody.